Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar this evening. We are so thrilled to have you. Really great conversation that we're going to have this evening around sports and mental health. How perfect that we're coming off of the Olympics. And so talk about timing. We're so glad you are here. I'm going to just start letting everybody in. We're starting to fill up with all of our participants. And then I will kick us off for the evening, let you know a little bit about who we are here at NAMI and the amazing team that we have joining you tonight. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully you can all see that. So again, just welcome. I want to introduce myself. My name is Donnell DeRubis. I am a Connect with Hope peer support specialist alongside the NAMI Greater Los Angeles County. And I have my team here tonight as well, my supervisor and my counterpart, Patria. So again, we are so excited you're here. Just a few quick rules, nothing major. We want to let you know that this is a safe, respectful, and confidential space. The webinar is being recorded so that we can send that out to you after the webinar is over. If you're like me, I like to look back and refresh my memory on things that I learned and the different things that were shared. Your camera can be on or off. We would love to see you, but this is your space. And again, we want you to feel the most comfortable. And then we do ask you to please stay on mute to help eliminate that background noise or any of those distractions that may come up. And I want to assure you that we will have a Q&A, question and answer session at the end. So as the presentation is going along, if anything comes up for you, please feel free to drop that into the chat, and that will come to myself or to my amazing supervisor, who I will introduce to you in just a moment. And we will be sure that those get addressed this evening. If for some reason you just blow that chat up with a bunch of questions and we run out of time, don't worry. We have your contact information and we will be sure to follow up with you after the webinar. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to my amazing supervisor, Ligaya.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ligaya Sevilla. I am the Connect with Hope Team Supervisor. So me, alongside Donnell and Patria, we do the warm line here at NAMI Greater Los Angeles County. It is open 10 to 8, Monday through Friday. And if you go to our webpage, which is namiglac.org/warmline, it has all the information, including the phone number, which I'm not remembering off the top of my head. I apologize. I should have that memorized. But we do the warm line. We do outreach events in the community. And we also conduct webinars every month on salient topics that have to do with mental health and wellness. And so, yes, coming off of the Olympics, we thought it would be great to do this one on sports and mental health with all the kids going back to school and whatnot. Prior to NAMI, I worked in corporate entertainment for about 15 years before leaving to explore my passion in mental health. And I've been with NAMI for the past year, and it's been extremely rewarding. So I love it. So now I'm going to introduce our esteemed presenter tonight, Steph Buerkel, who is with Insight Recovery. And she herself is actually a former elite gymnast. And she, Steph, would you mind bringing up your bio, your slides, so I can make sure I fully praise you?
Let me make sure I do this correctly.
Here we go. There's the number to the warm line. Yes, there's the number right there. So yeah,
the warm line so that people can.
Yeah, in case you want the warm line number, it's 818-208-1801. There's our website. It's 10 to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday. We are here for you if you just want some support or for us to lend an ear. If you need actual resources, we can definitely provide you. So we're here for anything you could possibly need, especially if there's NAMI resources that you're curious about. We have all that information. So, okay, great. Next slide. So Stephanie Buerkel comes to us from Insight Mental Health and Wellness. She's the Director of Employee Services there. She's also a great volunteer and supporter of NAMI. She's a board member of EAPA regionally and nationally, and a prior, as I said, elite and collegiate gymnast. She graduated from The Ohio State University with a degree in pharmacy and started her career in pharmaceuticals in New York City. In 2016, her journey took a pivotal turn. She discovered her passion for mental health, which led her to California with her husband in 2023, where she now resides in Orange County, which is where I reside. Go OC. Steph is deeply engaged in volunteer work and is a sought-after speaker at national forums, advocating for mental health awareness. So we're very lucky to have her here tonight. Outside of her work, Steph finds joy in sports, running, spending time with friends and family, and the beach. And just today, she has agreed to run a half marathon with me in March with the NAMI team. So we're doing the NAMI charity half marathon together, which is the day of the LA Marathon in March of next year. So it's very exciting. So now, with no further ado, I will kick it over to Steph, and she will be leading the presentation. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the introduction. Thank you for everyone that has joined sports and the background of mental health and related to sports. And just as I'm going to kick back to this one again. This is one of my favorite topics, just having been an athlete since the age of 7 and talking about mental health. So I don't know how many are athletes on here. We've got a small crew, so feel free to jump into the chat or raise a hand. And then Ligaya or anybody that sees a hand raised that you would like to me address, I'm happy to do so. Because in my teens as an athlete, when I thought about mental health, I thought, and I don't want to use poor language, but I thought it was BS because I was thinking when I was talking with a sports psychologist, I thought I'd rather be training right now. I don't need to talk about mental health. However, had I stepped back and known the me now as a 44-year-old, how important mental health care was, I would have talked about it. And we'll talk about a couple athletes during the presentation that are coming forward finally. And I'm glad that I'm in this journey and industry in mental health now. So I'm super passionate. But yeah, 16-year-old Steph did not think this was the thing. So. And I have to move this around. This is the only thing I dislike, that I have to move around everyone when I'm doing the slides. And not that I like to read. So my preference is in-person presentations. And I do a lot of in-person presentations, and it's more active. And I don't know how there's a presentation I do on presence and absent presence. So, and again, as Ligaya said, it's nice to see everybody's faces and have people actively engaged. So I don't know, feel free to keep your camera off or how you want to, but I like having individuals actively engaged, especially when it's a small community. But I did want to address at first just some data on mental health concerns. And Ligaya, yeah, let me know if something comes up in the chat, because as a presenter, I'm not looking there. I'm looking at the slides. So just let me know. As we know, and I'm not going to read because I don't like doing that. I like to be more active with how I feel about what I'm presenting. As we know, and with the CDC, that the numbers of office visits regarding mental health concerns, and the reason I put concerns right here in the top line versus disorders, is I'm trying to make something nationally known that mental health is truly not a disorder. It is a concern. A disorder makes people feel uncomfortable. So a concern is a little bit more available and makes people more comfortable with having the conversation. A disorder implies that there's something wrong. And when we're talking about mental health, it's not truly a disorder. It's your brain's function in trying to move forward and accurately be a human being, to be honest. So all these figures that I have here based on the CDC are they have been increasing. And what I'll tell you on all these stats, and I'll share the slides with you after the fact. I think these are low. So when we start providing and presenting these figures and percentages, it's how many are accurately disclosing what they feel, nervousness or anxiety, for example, on the second bullet point there, or depression, 5%. I think that's so low. And number of visits to emergency departments with mental health disorders. Are you actually coming in with a mental health disorder, or is the ER, how are they diagnosing that? But I just wanted to start with some CDC data based on mental health matters. And then I wanted to jump into college and universities and their mental health. So the prior company, or well, two companies that I worked for before, they said the college students, so right here it says 86% of college students have felt overwhelmed. That is a high stat. So I pretty much believe that percentage and feel that's accurate. 81% exhaustion, 30% students depressed to function. So these are high stats. I think these might be closer to accurate than the last one here with the CDC. But the rates of anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation on college campuses we haven't seen them higher. I will be careful about using that as well, because I'm using stats from 2 years ago, 2 years ago. So maybe they're declining. I don't know that accuracy. So if someone were to ask me specific dates, what I do know is over the past 3 to 5 years, everything related to mental health has increased. So not to read, but majority of college students today meet the criteria for at least one mental health problem. Rates of mental health problems are same among all students and all races. I have a different slide and a different presentation that talks about not just races, but ages, demographics, and that kind of thing. But students of color are unfortunately less likely to get treatment. And counseling centers, we've all seen this. I'm not sure how and who are on the call, but counseling centers are also overwhelmed and less likely to seek help themselves. So when we're talking about athletes, it adds a whole different dynamic. So athletes are under a different pressure, not to diminish any kind of student that's going to school and college, but student athletes have a fear, and it's a very interesting time that this presentation is happening, because I went to a PCP California, and I'm assuming most people are from California that are here today. So I went to a PCP conference over the weekend, and a comment came up about student athletes and pressures on them. And when we talk about mental health, there is an additional concern when it comes to athletes, and it's the fear of losing your scholarship. So the fear of talking about mental health and certain dynamics that happen during that process a lot of individuals, and me having been a student athlete, I had roommates, unfortunately, that had a lot of mental health concerns, eating disorders, because I was a gymnast. And there was a fear of losing that athletic scholarship. So that's something that needs to be more talked about, I believe. And it's an additional pressure for student athletes. Pressure for academics, of course, that goes all around. Everyone wants to excel, and that's also a concern when it comes to athletes. So if your GPA falls back to a certain level, you can't be on the team at the same level that you were, in a way that someone that wasn't a student athlete could be. And then the relatability to other students, because not to go too much into this, it's hard as an athlete when everyone's going out partying during a football game, and as an athlete, you have to go to the gym. So there's the relatability factor. And Ligaya, let me know if anybody raises their hands, and I'm happy to address, because we do have a small crowd. So when it comes to student athletes and pressures, there's a whole different conversation that happens regarding self-esteem and self-worth. And when it comes to athletes, or I guess I don't consider myself an athlete anymore, but athletes in themselves are determined by their success, their playing time, ranking, how they're doing. I put field in there because that's how it comes up. But that's a whole self-esteem issue that comes down to a huge pressure when it comes to student athletes, and really minimized, I think. That's my thought. There's a tremendous pressure, just constantly being evaluated, not just by, I have this here, coaches, scouts, teammates, and rival teams. The pressure is on, and I don't even have this in here, your family. You have this expected presence and or expectation to be that winner. And I put this in here for a reason. The slide with the books on the left and the sports on the right, and then the brain, because I incorporate the brain because we're talking about mental health, and it's where is the balance? So that's a reason that I thought this was important to discuss. I'll touch on this briefly. I love this left image of the basketball player that she looks to me, and raise a hand if you have any ideas, because there's stress all around. And there's a mirror on the right for a reason, that she looks successful, happy, and healthy. However, stress is all around her because the image of her reflecting in the mirror is not necessarily her on the field or where she is playing, because elite athletes, collegiate athletes, and not even at that level, there's a lot of stress and mental health involved. So I love this picture and slide, because mirroring what is internalizing versus what you feel is very different than what people might see. So then, of course, and I got to move everybody around again, because yeah, the intense pressure, unrealistic. There is a picture also, and for any of those on here, I have my contact information at the end of this presentation, and I got to be mindful of time and make sure that I'm not spending too much time on slides. There is one that I love that has a different picture that I love. It's more related to trauma, but I do like this picture as we're talking about athletes and mental health. Oh, now that I moved everyone, now I can't move forward. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I like this as well. And I know Ligaya likes this too as a track, and feel free to jump in as well, because we are running the half marathon also, and I said I'd loop you in as you want to. So feel free to unmute and jump in talking about track.
No, I muted it because my daughter's home and I don't want her to interrupt. She's 4.
Got it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was a former track and field runner and a distance runner in high school and college, and also competed in triathlons in my once I started working. And I definitely had performance anxiety as a freshman at USC, because USC is definitely known for their running program. As anybody that watched the track and field Olympics knows, they had a few USC runners there. And the minute I got there, I started to not be able to keep my food down. I was losing a lot of weight. They weighed us once a week, which really didn't help with mental health or your self-image. You're also, like Steph mentioned, rooming with other athletes. So we're all kind of sharing the same neuroses and talking about practice and balancing schoolwork and keeping our GPAs up. And the track atmosphere, track and field and cross country at a college like USC can be very demanding and stressful. A lot of pressure, especially with that uniform on, from family as well, who are really excited for you, but they're also causing some stress because they want you to obviously do well. And I had to let my coach know that I was having too much anxiety my first semester there to run the cross country course, which is about 3 miles. And I just couldn't do it by the middle of the season. And I had to sit the rest of the season out, unfortunately. So I later ran the steeplechase in track and field, and everything was fine. And then I ended up doing triathlons and half marathons as an adult. But I definitely can relate to being a student athlete and how hard it is. So there's my little anecdote.
Thank you. I was hoping you would share your story too. And I love that because it's part of how Ligaya and myself bonded over both mental health and athletics, and why honestly she was so gracious to ask me to do this presentation today, because we can relate in a couple different ways when it comes to this. So yeah, thank you. I was hoping you were going to jump in and say something, and please continue to do so.
I'll jump in.
And anyone else too, because we do have a smaller crowd. So anyone that wants to raise a hand, please feel free to share your stories. And you can always learn from others that have been through similar, or I say relatable, but maybe it's relatable, maybe it's not. However, it's always nice to hear from people to know, and I say this later, that we're not alone when it comes to this. So I do like this slide. And I have gotten into running, and I did say that, and committed to Ligaya that I will run the half with her, with NAMI in March. So anybody on here too that would like to join, please do so. But I like this. What I'm trying to advocate for, and I don't want to jump ahead because I'm going to talk about in 2 slides brain health, but athletes and mental health we're not used to using the verbiage of brain health. Athletes are typically used to using health related to their bodies, and the brain is a huge part of the body, which is why we're going to talk about brain health. But every diagnosis is not, we're getting there. I don't think we're fully there, but not as I say in the first bullet point, not every diagnosis is evident on an X-ray or MRI. We're getting closer with EEGs, and I'm not sure who on here is familiar with TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation, which does EEGs and looks at your brain and the brain waves, we're trying to move forward. And Ligaya, is that driving you nuts that I don't have a little thing on the example there? But depression, anxiety, traumas, it's not diagnosable in the same way that cancers, tumors, diseases are, and it should be. So again, too often these issues are ignored. And I referenced Dr. Matthew Sacco here. A national conversation on this issue has begun, and rightfully so, as a sports psychologist. So we are having these conversations. And again, thank you for having me on this presentation, because we are talking about it. Mental health is important. And this might be a little redundant here, so I'll go through it quickly. But again, I mean, when we're talking about getting an x-ray for a sprained ankle or a broken wrist, or the two examples I use, we're now doing EEGs and brain scans and finding where mental and brain health is important. However, a decade or two ago, that was not talked about. So when we're talking about physical injuries, and I consider brain health and mental health a physical injury, and I think we're going to start using, and hope we start using that terminology, those are easier to diagnose than mental health, but we're getting close. And then I like the bottom part. I mean, what happens when athletes say, I mean, if you have a compound fracture and you have to walk away from, and I like this image as well, you break your foot and you're running, whatever it might be. This looks like a fast race. Ligaya, you'd be better at me than explaining how quick this race might be. But if somebody were to tear a tendon or break an ankle in the run, how different would that be if mentally you were in distress and couldn't finish the meet or competition? So what is the support, concerns, and needs related to that?
Well, and I can say really quickly, when I had to step away for the season in running, and I think that's probably like a 100 or 200 meter dash is what it looks like. But there was tremendous shame that I felt and embarrassment. And my coach, you know, they were ill-equipped at that time, like without totally giving away my age. This was like 20 years ago. And he said, you have performance anxiety, and I will coach you through that. Problem is, he's not a therapist. He's not a mental health professional. He's a coach. He's a running coach. So they didn't have that structure in place to support the athletes back at that time. And I felt a lot of just regret and shame and that stigma that's attached to mental health. Just knowing that I had to sit on the sidelines with not a physical issue, but a mental issue, is still something that was keeping me from performing. So, yeah, I think athletes to this day still feel an immense amount of shame and guilt when they have to take time off to recover from a mental health situation. But hopefully it's getting better.
Thank you. Yeah, that's amazing. And thanks for mentioning. It was like, yeah, I couldn't for some reason think in my mind. I'm like, dash, like a meter.
It's dash,
and
yeah. They're sprinting.
Yeah, what is
They're
it?
Sprinting. Yeah.
I'm like, what is this? What is
that guy
this?
is way behind. He needs to get up there. Yeah.
So when we do jump into the whole brain health, and this is new, I think, new terminology that we're starting to use, because mental does, and to your point as well that you just said, and the point of the presentation too, talking about mental health, is that mental, I still use this word, and don't judge me when I say this, but it's true. I think we all do. When I say, oh, I'm crazy, or so-and-so's crazy, and it's a mental concern, but why are we still using the word great. Like that's something we shouldn't be using. And then I also correlate that with mental health. People think, oh, you're mental. Oh, you're mental. Oh, you're crazy. So when I start to talk about brain health and how we have to transform this terminology, I'm trying to talk about it. If your heart was malfunctioning, you wouldn't say, oh, you've got a crazy heart. You'd say, oh, you've got a cardiovascular disease. So trying to talk about and reframe how we talk about and normalize the conversation related to mental health, brain health, and what we can do. I guess normalize isn't the right word, but really talk about it in a healthier manner. So when we're talking about this, and I use the brain, and to be honest, and I should have said this from the beginning in the forefront, I'm not a clinical provider. I am not an MD or PCP or psychologist for that matter. I've just been in this industry for personal reasons for 8.5 years and very passionate. And I spend a lot of my time creating presentations and very passionate about this industry. So that's a little bit more of my background. But brain health is something that I really look into and I think is very important and know is very important about the presence or absence of disorders. So for any, and I mentioned briefly about TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation, that is something that specifically targets the brain. And I did want to, and now my little things down here, but so we did want to address that we're all pretty familiar with working out, and this is related to sports, but endorphins plays a huge part in boosting blood flow to your brain. The EEG studies, again, it improves memory, stimulates creativity, and does help your brain develop better problem solving skills. So the more we can be active, whether it's athletic, and I'd like to mention this too, is that my own personal therapist back in Pennsylvania had said, she said, Steph, you're the best when you're active. However, if you're not, what happens if you do break an ankle? You need to have brain health because you're not going to be able to work out. You're not going to be an athlete or active when it comes to mental health. So I think it's important to relate that our brain does play a big part when it comes to being active, but also we can't be fully reliant on that. And then I did put down here at the bottom, the vagus nerve. There's been a lot of studies with the vagus nerve and how that relates to mental health and physical health. Okay, so I get a little conflicted, and if anyone wants to raise a hand, let me know if somebody raises a hand on here. Asking for help. So as I mentioned early on in the presentation, is that when I was an athlete myself, asking for help was a sign of weakness. So where I'm putting here in the quotes is that carries a big stigma. Asking for help is in the past and still currently, and hopefully we can change this, a stigma for athletes. It says you're not strong enough to compete, you're not strong enough to be at the level that you're at. So really, and I know I'm not, well, I'm on camera, but I know the slides are the big thing. I wear a bracelet that says shed shame. So trying to break this stigma based on mental health and athletes. And I will share this, the 3 demographics that I love working with and doing presentations to are athletes, first responders, and C-suite individuals, because they are the toughest to talk about mental health with. because it is considered historically a sign of weakness. So anything that we can do to break the stigma is incredible. And I'll go into this in the next couple slides too. But athletes are typically regarded and put on a pedestal. And I put this in the second bullet point down. Oh, how did I do that? In the second bullet point, warriors, competitors that really just don't have emotions and push forward in the pursuit of victory. And while that can be true, there's a healthy way to do so. And I think that athletes just talking about mental health and minimizing the stigma of mental health will make us move strides in a long way. This might be a little redundant too, but I did, oh, no, this is a good one. Ligaya, yeah. What if I didn't address this? You'd say, right? There has been, and feel free to jump in and interject because I know you have feelings on this too. Social media has played a huge impact on athletes and mental health. And I put this in just a couple hours ago on the right, that picture of the basketball player shooting. And there's a bunch of the social media apps, and not to age myself, I'm like, I don't even know, is Twitter X or Twitter, what is it called now? And some of these that I'm not even on. But the point being, go ahead.
No, Twitter is now X. Yeah, but people still refer to it as Twitter, so it's fine. Yeah. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, there's so many, like, it's just TikTok. Oh my goodness, there's so many now. It's just everywhere. Go ahead. Sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that was perfect. No, I hope you do. The reason I like this picture is for many reasons. So you see an athlete here, and it looks like he's going to make the shot, right? You see the beautiful sun in the background. Then you see all these things that could impede with him making the shot. And it's social media. I mean, who knows? And you never know what could happen. And 2 decades ago, this wasn't a consideration, right? Now we're thinking about, and I'm guilty of it, and we go on social media and look at all these individuals that, like, oh, that's a beautiful basketball shot, but where is your mind actually? And so, and then additionally, with the effects of social media and athletes, is that there is, to the second bullet point, exposed to constant online comparisons with other athletes. So one of the upcoming slides, I have an athlete that we all know, and I'll get to that. But it can lead to competitivism that relates to mental health in a negative way. So social media has really affected mental health related to athletes in a huge way. And then I'm not sure who on here is as familiar with NIL. So NIL was instrumented. Gosh, I wish I knew the date, and I know my husband's in the other room. On here, he might know the exact year that it was instituted, but it's name, image, likeness. So athletes are now allowed to make money as collegiate athletes based on NIL and NCAA sports. So what that means is, if anybody, of course, based on my presentation, you know that I was a gymnast. It was very difficult for me taking money. Well, I didn't take any money, but I was offered money as a 16-year-old to do leotard modeling, and we had to refuse it because I had to refuse a full scholarship. Now athletes are allowed to accept money and sign contracts based on NIL, so name, image, likeness. And that's really changed the national everything related to athletes and student athletes. Ben, I don't know if you're there and you want to jump in and say anything related to that. You know a little bit more than me. I don't want to put you on the spot, but
He did note that it was 2 years ago NIL was established.
Yeah, I just shared that it was 2 years ago, and yeah, I mean, you explained it very well.
thank you. So I didn't want to dive into gymnastics too much, but for those that aren't as familiar, Simone Biles, and I had the pleasure, I'm going to start from the bottom up, and I got to move my slide or my picture of everyone up here for a second. So the conference that I was at over the weekend, it was very interesting how this transpired. So Dr. Faustin, Marcia Faustin, who's on the right in this picture, well, she's on the right to Simone Biles, but left in the picture. I attended this conference on Saturday, and I looked her up Friday night, and I said, "Oh my gosh, it's Dr. Marcia Faustin that's doing a presentation on Saturday." And I didn't realize that she was the primary care doctor. And I don't like using his name, but she replaced the physician that had all of the molestation charges prior with the USAG, United States Gymnastics, Larry Nasser. I was struggling there because I didn't want to say his name. So I had the pleasure of meeting her on Saturday and really talked to her personally too. She was the first PCP that talked. And if you see this picture, you can see Simone looking off in the distance and Dr. Faustin trying to look her in the eye. And she said to me personally on Saturday, she said, "Steph, Simone looked very disassociated. She didn't seem like she was with it. And she thought she was going to fail, not just herself, her coaches, USA, the country, everything." So it was so timely doing this presentation and meeting her on Saturday. And I've had conversations with Simone's agent as well about this, but I'm really amazed and proud about an elite athlete, an Olympic athlete coming out at that level that realized not just concerning for her physical health, everything that was going on, but mental health. And it was truly a mental health concern that Simone Biles was going through. And she's not the only one. So I just really thought this was great to address and talk about an Olympic athlete that came forward and said, and part of the conversations that I've had with Dr. Faustin and not Simone, I haven't spoken with her personally, but related to traumas and mental health, if anybody knows the background of the traumas and mental health that Simone has gone through and how she thrived and succeeded, she made it past a lot. However, it wasn't without therapy. So if you see the first bullet point right there, seeing a psychologist was very instrumental. She used to think of therapy as weakness, as I thought of as an athlete myself. Now it's a strength and just doing that. So then I include the quote down there, "And still I rise." So that's a tattoo, the only tattoo that Simone Biles has on her upper chest. You can't see it because it's always covered by her leotard. So it's "And Still I Rise" by Maya Angelou that Simone Biles has tattooed. So again, I'm just going to check the time real quick, see where I'm at. Okay, good. So I don't like, the reason I put this in quotes is I don't like the terminology right here pulled out. It was I'm saying medical condition. It's called mental condition. Some other athletes that Ligaya and I have talked about and that I've talked about with other individuals on a national level, NAMI, Osaka with tennis, Michael Phelps, swimming. He's come out about his mental health concerns and substance abuse. Sha'Carri Richardson, we know what she's been through regarding track and field. Ligaya, if you want to speak to that, because you know more, being from the track and field world.
It's funny because hers is really linked to social media as well, because she became someone that she has a very unique look to her. And so advertisers really liked her. And, she was like, back in the day, you're like on the Wheaties cereal box or something. But Sha'Carri became like she was like her own brand. And she said that really gave her crippling anxiety at one point that like affected her physically on the track. And she had to get therapy and actually realize that it was mental. It was like the anxiety that was going on in her own head that she needed to come to terms with and cope with so that she could actually keep performing in the 200 and the 100 and the 400 on the track. So a lot to do with like that social media branding, comparing herself to other athletes, and just the stress and the pressure of being a famous athlete. And they also did a documentary on the track and field stars in the United States leading up to the World Championships. And I think on Netflix, and I forget what it's called, Speed, I think. But she was featured there, and she talks about her mental health struggles when she became kind of her own brand, and the social media and reading through the comments and kind of doom scrolling, which is a term that, where you just can't stop scrolling and you just keep looking at the social media and it just keeps you up till all hours. And it's like it becomes an obsession kind of. So that happened to Sha'Carri Richardson. But she's been very open about it. Now she's very pro mental health and getting treatment and therapy and whatnot. So it's a positive outcome.
Love that. Yeah, thank you. I knew you'd have something better to share in that than I would. But so what I'd like to see, and on the third bullet point too, is that when, and I don't have this in here, so when Simone Biles in 2021, which by the way was supposed to be 2020 Olympics, but of course postponed a year due to COVID, so she had to wait a full another year to win gold, but when she did, and I'm saying pulled out or withdrew is what I'm going to change that, withdrew from the 2021 Olympics. She did end up competing finally in some of the events. However, when they withdrew Simone Biles from this, they didn't know how to fill out the injury report form. So the form was modified after the 2021 Olympics and I hope this happens. I can't speak to it right now. I will look into it. And if anybody has any information on it to share with me, I'd love to hear more. But they did modify the International Gymnastics Federation injury form to include mental health as an injury. So at that time, it was they had to make a lot of adjustments in order for Simone to withdraw. But now we're getting modifications when it comes to athletes and mental health and that type of thing. And then I just liked to add, and I added that this morning. Sorry, I'm moving everybody around again. Simone was very, very instrumental and open about what she went through mental health wise, and went to Paris and won gold. And maybe that's not the outcome for everyone. However, she was vocal about what she went through. She did seek treatment. There is treatment and help available, and worked well for her, but she's an incredible person. So an individual and I might bring you in again, Ligaya, on this one, since you know more. So Christopher Hubbard is an NFL player for the 49ers now. and been very vocal about mental health, the importance of mental health, and has a video. I don't know, it's an 8-minute video. So what I'm going to do is share all of my slides with everyone. I encourage you to look at the video because it's, again, when we're talking about athletes and mental health, there is this perception that, oh, you're an athlete, and I don't know his weight, and I shouldn't guess weight because we shouldn't talk about weight. But when you're talking about a 6 foot plus, 200 plus pound player, NFL player that is struggling with mental health, that is saying, I'm here to talk about it, because that's not what we see on the television on Sundays. And the fact that there are individuals struggling and willing to talk about it, and willing to talk about it on the behalf of NAMI, is pretty amazing. So I don't know if, Ligaya, we should play the video. It is 8 minutes, but I just encourage everyone. I will share these slides to view the video.
I think we should just, since it is almost 7, I think we can just share the slides with everyone. And I encourage you also to watch the video. The link is there on the bottom. He goes back to his hometown, speaks to some of the high school students where he used to go to school. And it's just a really inspiring video, Strength Over Silence. And it's on the NAMI website. And we do have our ambassadors, which have public platforms, but are advocates for NAMI nationally. And so he is one of them. We have quite a few athletes that are NAMI ambassadors, actually. But Chris Hubbard, who I think just recently joined the 49ers, so he was on different teams before. So he might have been on a different team when he did the video, but the video is very good. So I do encourage you guys to watch it after.
Thank you. Yeah, it's quite inspiring. This again, since we're coming up at 7, I was thinking about changing this a little bit, but I did look this up an hour before we jumped on. The first one, 2/3 of student athletes indicated knowing where on campus to go for mental health concerns. So I was questioning whether that was accurate or not. The thing is, it is accurate. They're just not going. And then a couple of the others below, the majority reported knowing how to help a teammate experiencing a mental health issue. However, are they doing it? Are they addressing it? Discussing with their friend and or colleague or teammate. So there is knowledge more than we know, because I did question this about 2 hours ago. Individuals do know. My question and thought is, do they know exactly where to go? So I am still questioning that first bullet point, where and how comfortable, because there's a huge confidentiality piece that happens. And then the big thing is on 3, the third bullet point is that it's less likely the comfortableness of actually seeking support. So I think the more that we can share and let individuals know that, I should put in a bullet point here, we're not alone. It was interesting and related to this. I went to trauma treatment myself, and when I returned, I shared with individuals when I lived in Pennsylvania, and they said, "Oh my gosh, you did?" and that kind of thing. We want to go, how did that transpire and how did it happen? So the more that we talk about, because people were shocked. They said, "Steph, you did this yourself and you seem so strong." And sometimes athletes put on this persona that they are strong and the more we can talk about it. Not to normalize, that's the wrong word, but talk about it makes people feel more comfortable, because based on some of these stats, people do know there is support out there, just where to go. And to revert back to the other slide, stigma, lessen the stigma. I'm going to skip past this, but I am going to share the slides so that you guys can see some percentages. I'm a numbers person, so I like to see data, but I don't really want to dig into it because I always wonder where it came from and how accurate it is. I'll share this. The point being of this slide is just the just the first comment. Athletes are not immune to mental health challenges, and that's so thought that successful collegiate and Olympic and even amateur athletes or NFL, no matter what it is, individuals that are successful athletes are looked at like you don't have any mental health challenges. So I like looking at this as percentages. And then again, I just wanted to share, universities are definitely implementing programs focusing on mental health well-being. I will say they're definitely overwhelmed. I don't know a ton about in California. So I've been in California for 1.5 years now, but when I was back in Pennsylvania, they said between the before pandemic and after pandemic, the students that were utilizing the mental health counseling centers was typically around 8 to 9%. And then in 2021, it was around 34%. So all the universities were overwhelmed with students asking for mental health. That's a good thing, but we've all seen what happens with retention and everyone, and even the mental health professionals being overwhelmed with individuals asking for help. But there are resources, and please know, whether it's NAMI or myself or whatever it might be, there are people out there willing to help. And I just put on put up here a couple of resources as well. I'm going to glaze over this then to 705. I like this too, because as a prior athlete, and I'm sure any athletes on here too, to be an athlete, I never thought I'd be in mental health. So where do you begin with that? There is the potential, and going back to Simone, I mean, just talking about mental health and all the other individuals and athletes, there is a way that we can give back and talk about it and connect and inspire others to do the same is what I love. And then also post-athletic career. It's a struggle when you lose what you were quote unquote known for your entire life. That was your career, right? As an athlete. So there's a lot of different industries and places that you can go into. And a lot of athletes are starting to go into mental health. And if we can stick together and do that together and help and support each other, I think it's huge. And this is a little related to there's a whole mental health piece related to post-career. And I put career in quotes for a reason. I mean, it is a career. People don't consider it a career, but it really is. So just really finding a way to stay involved, as we all are. We're here for a reason. Taking care of your mental health is hugely instrumental. You're not alone with feelings that you might be going through, and connect with others to pursue what you might want to do. And with that, some resources that I wanted to share. I am obviously very affiliated with NAMI nationally. I was affiliated with them back in Pennsylvania. Very affiliated with Greater Los Angeles, NAMI as well. I'm also on the board of National EBA. For those that aren't familiar, it's Employee Assistance Professionals Association. Unfortunately, the LA chapter dissolved, but I'm working on bringing them back and also involving them in Orange County. SAMHSA is a big one. And then I volunteer and do work because I'm so passionate about NAMI. So I do presentations and volunteer to the events they do. I am employed, so I have to give a shout out. I am employed by Insight Mental Health and Wellness. We are a mental health treatment center here in Newport Beach. We do primary mental health, working with major depressive disorder, trauma, suicidal ideation, see a lot of self-harm, eating disorder, substance abuse, and doing a lot of work in that way. So that's where I'm employed by. I just love volunteering. I love presenting. So if anybody is interested in me doing future presentations, happy to do so. And then after this, this is my contact information. If you want to write it down for those there. And then I do have slides following this that include mental health. For example, just glossary of terms, learning about mental health, treatment options. I don't want to go through it all, but I will send out the slides, and you're welcome to share, save, and anything you can do. And that's my LinkedIn, by the way, if anybody wants to look me up. With that, I'll turn it over to anyone that has questions or a hand raised.
I do have some questions that came through the chat.
Okay.
There's actually 3. I'll start with the first one, which is actually 2-part. And I know you kind of touched on this, but if you could expand on what mental health services are typically offered for athletes on campus at universities. And the second part to that is, are schools typically good with connecting student athletes to outside mental health resources?
Great question. And I don't want to be, I never want to be harsh when I'm talking about different. Is there a college, if someone's listening that asks a question, is there a specific college that was made, and or does someone want to speak up about that college?
There wasn't anything specific on the question, but.
Okay. So my answer to that is going to be, it varies. And as I mentioned a little bit there in the end, a lot of the collegiate mental health centers have been inundated and overwhelmed and understaffed, to be honest. So certain campuses there's a go-to, and there's a couple things. Gosh, this is a complicated thing. There are individuals that go through the student health center insurance plan, number one. So they might be getting insurance and mental health insurance through their college that they're enrolled in. So that would be diverted to the college and the health center that is affiliated with the insurance plan that they're working with. if they are under a parental, and now I'm talking about insurance, so I don't want to get too involved in that. There are health centers for insurance companies. If you could have someone specifically with that question reach out to me, and I'm happy to get a little more specific, because it truly depends on the college, whether it's a private university, public university. They all operate a little bit differently. So I don't want to mislead anyone with an answer to that. And I don't also like not having an answer. It just depends on the specific university, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. The second question comes after one of your slides where you were talking about an athlete being able to maintain that competitive spirit and nature and really, go for the gold, so to speak, along with their mental health. And you talked about coping skills. Can you share what some of those healthy ways are to find that balance?
Yes. You know what? I should add this slide. I don't know how many on, sorry if you see me and I look like I'm looking around the place, because I'm doing a lookup on my computer. There are, and I don't know which is my favorite. And again, provide everyone my contact information. There is, and it depends on the individual, there are a couple different resources for coping skills related to not just athletics, but all the above. And I like to use the example, why did that happen? Sorry, I was Googling. Yeah, there's a list of, the first one that was initiated was 60 different coping skills that you use for mental health. But then I modified them a little bit for athletics, and then some for student athletes and some for students. So there's a couple different books too that I can send out. It's hard for me to work in the chat as I'm, presenting and talking.
Stephanie, if you'd be willing to share those with me, I'll send them
is what
out.
I'll say.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, if you want to share any of those links or books with us, I'll be sure to send it out to all the participants.
Yeah. Why don't I email that to you? Gosh, that was in I did a presentation last week to City of Anaheim, and I think I had that one in there. It was something like, is that what you're looking at? Coping skills, coping mechanisms specific to student athletes?
Correct.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up too. And I'm happy to mention that because, as I said, when I went to trauma treatment myself, I'm not a big yoga person. I like getting my heart rate up. Like, I like running. However, I found that the biggest and most impactful skills that I took away from doing mental health treatment was art therapy, yoga therapy, and what's the third? But a couple things that I never would have thought. If somebody said I was going to walk into an art room as an athlete and say, I'm going to take away something mental health related here, I would have laughed, to be honest, and really felt that was instrumental, beneficial for me. So, and the other thing is too, related to your question, not to keep going on, but working with first responders, a lot of first responders and law enforcement, they're like, I'm not going to go to yoga or art therapy. And then you see first responders and law enforcement going into therapy, and those modalities all of a sudden open up their minds to mental health that they never thought would be beneficial. So it isn't, I can provide the list and share with you, but it's sometimes thinking outside the box and even something that you wouldn't think would be beneficial that helps most, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you. The third question, the final one, is, are there any positive sides to social media? And I think if we can put that spin on it from an athlete's perspective, and I just think of the story that Ligaya shared about that athlete, became a brand.
I don't want to interrupt you. Yeah, I just was going to say, Steph, do you mind if we were studying this earlier because they were like, what do we put in this social media slide? What should we do? And we were Googling, and the first thing they mention is the positives of it, which is obviously building their brand. So some of these athletes, they can now market themselves in high school, like Steph was saying with the NIL or NIL or however you call that. They become celebrities, and they can really market themselves very effectively through TikTok videos and Instagram and Facebook, and really get more notoriety that way. And they form their own fan clubs and communities, and they interact with their fans, and they really get to know who the fans actually get to know them in different ways, because they can, create reels, and they can, really, just interact in general. So there are great things about social media as far as like building a brand and fan interaction and just notoriety and whatnot. But there's also a price, as we know, for celebrities. There's a downside to that as well. So, Steph, if you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, and I'm sorry if I put or not sorry, but apologize if I put a negative connotation on that, because there are plus sides and then also negative sides. And here's the thing with anything is that anything in moderation with a healthy balance is a good thing. And I'm guilty of going on, I know I'm 44, so I go on Facebook and look at my friends' pictures because I love that, and that's healthy. And I know that, and here's the thing with social media and internet in general, they know what my passions are, because every time I go on to any, whatever it might be, website, there are three things that come up, and it's gymnastics videos, food, and something else sports related, because those are the three things that I love. And I love watching gymnastics videos, and I love doing that. So there is a benefit to it. It's when we go down to, and this is how I'll speak to it, because one of the other presentations, and if you ever want me in the future to do this one, last year I flew out to the Cleveland Clinic and did a presentation on gaming and device management. And it was a very controversial conversation, because I was talking about, gaming and devices, and then one of the social workers at the Cleveland Clinic, she said, my son's 15 and makes $300,000 a year gaming. Steph, how can you be saying this is a bad thing? And I was like, okay, well, I'm here to hear you out. That's wonderful, by the way. Congrats to him. But I think when it comes to social media, it's all about the fine line and balance and where we're going with it. So it's not an unhealthy thing. It's just a balance thing, if I could say anything better. Because I think we learn a lot of wonderful things. I still, to this day, even though I can't do gymnastics, because who can do gymnastics in their 40s? But I still learn tips and tricks. And then I look at running, and I'm hoping, I'm going to run with you for the half. And I look at all these different things. And if it wasn't for online, I mean, there's a lot of great things we have to learn through online. I prefer in person, but social media, people share great things. And the NIL thing, there are individuals making crazy money, that's not the ultimate. Well, we all want to make great money, but I don't know. I don't know if I'm like spinning here, but there are benefits, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Awesome. Thank you. That is all the questions I have. If anybody on still has any other questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. But I think that's it on this end.
I just wanted to say, Stephanie, I have like just a random question. You were mentioning EEGs and TMS, and I did do TMS therapy for my anxiety at one point. How like regular is it to do an EEG to accompany a person's TMS nowadays? Is that becoming standard practice? Because when I did TMS, they did not do an EEG, and I was like, that makes so much sense to look at the brain activity and then model the person's TMS after that. You know, that would be so wonderful to like football players who have trauma and head injuries and things like that. Like, I wonder if that's becoming, I'm just pondering it. Like, I'm wondering if it's becoming standard practice now to have an EEG accompany TMS treatment. Do you know anything about that? Or
I'm glad you brought that up. And I wish more people were having that conversation. It is not standard practice. Typically, and now that I just mentioned Cleveland Clinic, when I was there, they have a TMS. They use Neuronetics, one of the providers of, and they said, we don't even use this. And I was like, why? Yeah, I mean, you're paying for this. So no, it's not standard to do the EEG. However, I think moving forward, there are a couple practices that I'm proud to be affiliated with, and I'm happy to share that with you and or anybody else that are starting to do the EEG. And once they do the EEG, then they're finding out what your alpha is and optimize it and do the TMS based on that. It is not typical though. I think moving forward it will be, but if you hadn't heard of that before, I'm not surprised. Most don't.
I think UCLA is doing a clinical trial on it right now.
They are.
Yeah. So interesting. Yeah.
It's really cool. I mean, you go up, you get the EEG, they find your alpha, they do, yeah, it is really cool. Everyone that's doing TMS, to be honest, should be doing that monitoring or as a first step, but it's not the fact that you're bringing that up and saying you hadn't heard of that. I'm not surprised. Most aren't.
Yeah. Yeah. Next time I want to do an EEG because it didn't work for me the first time. So yeah, but I was lucky. I was part of a trial as well. So I wasn't really expecting anything, but I know it works wonders for some people.
Yeah.
Well, do we have any other questions, Donnell?
No, nothing else in the chat.
Okay. Well, it is almost 7:30. I just really want to thank you, Stephanie, for being with us this evening and giving this enlightening presentation. It's definitely a conversation that we need to be having in the mental health field and with student athletes, professional athletes, and everyone who supports them. Like you said, coaches, families, everyone. It's definitely a broad conversation that luckily we are having. We're hearing more and more about having more support for athletes and mental health. And as former athletes, I say you're an athlete your whole life. I mean, once you're an athlete, you have that athlete mentality. I think you're kind of always an athlete, even if your career ends at some point. But so I think, like you said, I think it's great to give back and to talk about this from the vantage point of having been a former athlete. So thank you so much for bringing your insight, which is where you work, but bringing your personal insight to this. And just we at NAMI GLAC just really thank you for doing this presentation tonight. So thank you for being here.
Awesome. Thank you as well for the invitation. Thanks for having me. Again, anyone that wants to reach out to me one-on-one, whether it's professionally, personally, it's very interesting doing presentations that sometimes after doing so, I'll get a call in the next hour and they'll say, Steph, I actually need to call you about a friend or a family member. So this isn't just about NAMI or Insight or me. If you or anyone knows somebody that is in need, don't hesitate to reach out.
And she will answer. I've given her some referrals. She will get back to them all. So, and Donnell, we're going to send out the presentation. And if anybody has questions after the fact, they can always email us back and we will forward them to Steph, or if we can answer them, we'll get back to you.
Absolutely.
So, that as well.
Okay. Amazing. You're the best. Thank you for everything.
Thank you, everyone, for
Thanks,
joining. Have a
everybody.
great evening.
Yes.
You too.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.